As part of the subsequent investigation, a forensic mechanic, at our request, examined the subject vehicle and indicated the belief that this vehicle was, in fact, prone to loud backfiring, and further had exhibited evidence of past backfiring. Officer Nan ran to his cruiser and radioed to dispatch a belief that they had been shot at from a vehicle occupied by two black male occupants, incorrectly believing at the time that both subjects were male. Officer Nan transmitted the following on radio channel 2, which was the primary radio frequency used during the pursuit. And I quote, "There were shots fired out of a vehicle. I was conferring with mobile support on St. Clair. Just notified the third, popped a round right as he drove by us." End of quote. Shortly thereafter, he advised, "Use caution, occupants are armed." Meanwhile, Officer Al Maydew ran into the building to retrieve his duty belt and later joined the tail end of the pursuit in a marked cruiser. Another marked cruiser in the area, manned by Officer David Seifer and James Hummel, heard Officer Nan's radio transmission and observed a vehicle matching the description on the Detroit Superior Bridge. They attempted to stop the vehicle. However, the vehicle fled, failing to obey the order to stop. Emergency lights and sirens on. At approximately 10:41, Officer Seifer radioed, "He's pointing," and I quote, "he's pointing the gun. He's pointing the gun out the back window. Heads up, heads up. Passenger is pointing a firearm out the back window. Everybody be careful." End of quote. A request for spike strips was then made, followed by Radio Officer Nan reiterating on the radio, quote, "He will fire, so be careful," end of quote. Additional radio traffic advised, quote, he had the gun when he went around the roundabout," end of quote. Officer Seifer then transmitted on the radio, quote, "Passenger is turning back around again, pointing a firearm," end of quote. At least two officers reported to investigators that they heard the subject vehicle backfire during the pursuit, although they did not radio this information at the time to the others. One of those officers said that he heard a separate bang from the vehicle and then observed debris in the road, incorrectly believing and then transmitting on the radio that the vehicle had blown a tire. An additional radio transmission during the pursuit informed officers that the subject vehicle had rammed a marked police cruiser. However, investigators later learned that it was an accidental contact that occurred shortly after entering East Cleveland during a quick turn in the pursuit, with Officer Kevin Fairchild's cruiser striking the rear of the subject vehicle. The ensuing pursuit of the subject vehicle lasted approximately 22 minutes, reportedly at times reaching speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. Surveillance videos obtained along the pursuit route show at one point a minimum of 62 police vehicles in pursuit or following along the pursuit route. Pursuers included officers in marked and unmarked Cleveland Police Department vehicles, as well as Ohio State Highway Patrol troopers, Cuyahoga County Sheriff deputies, Bracknell Police Department officers, and officers of the Regional Transit Authority Police Department, all of whom were peripherally involved. During the pursuit, significant radio traffic from pursuing officers and relayed by dispatchers indicated a belief that the passenger of the vehicle was armed with a gun, had already fired at the officers, was pointing the gun at pursuers, and was reloading the gun. Each officer was asked during their individual interviews by our investigators what radio traffic they heard and what radio transmissions they made. All 13 officers who eventually shot their weapons that night told our investigators that they had heard radio transmissions saying the passenger was brandishing a gun. All 13 also reported that they heard radio transmissions regarding the alleged ramming of Officer Fairchild's cruiser, as well as information regarding the decedent's disregard of Officer Hummel and Seifer's attempted traffic stop. At one point during the pursuit, Officer Fairchild indicated that the passenger in the subject vehicle was not, in fact, armed, but instead was wearing black gloves and holding a red pop can. This is what he radioed, quote, "Passenger just put his hands out asking us to stop. He does not have a gun. He has black gloves on. He does not have a gun in his hand," end of quote. He went on to radio, and I quote, "There's a pop can in his hand. There's a red pop can in his hand," end of quote. According to Fairchild's account to our investigators, this did not, in his mind, preclude the possibility that a gun may have otherwise been involved. The pursuit eventually entered the city of East Cleveland, where the subject vehicle entered a dead-end staff parking lot at Heritage Middle School located at 14410 Terrace Road. As the pursuit entered the parking lot, it was noted that the area was a dead end, and a request was made for the area to be blocked off. A radio transmission stated, quote, "All right, be advised, he looked like he was loading a weapon," end of quote. This was followed by the transmission, "Shots fired, shots fired." At approximately 10:55, "Watch the crossfire" was transmitted, followed by an additional indication to dispatch that shots had been fired. A request for EMS was made less than a minute later. A number of Cleveland police cruisers followed the subject vehicle into the lot by way of the only access drive. Other police vehicles eventually blocked this drive, essentially trapping the vehicle and some police vehicles in that lot. This contributed to a situation where police personnel were located on both sides of the subject vehicle. After the subject vehicle double-backed on the access drive while apparently attempting to exit the lot. In the parking lot, but prior to the subject vehicle doubling back, Officer Wilfredo Diaz's police cruiser made inadvertent contact with the rear corner of the subject vehicle after the subject vehicle made a quick left turn in front of Diaz. The subject vehicle turned directions facing back towards Diaz, jumping a curb onto a grass island. Being left-handed and believing the occupants to be armed, Diaz said and told our investigators that he felt vulnerable in his position behind the steering wheel, feeling unable to quickly draw and fire if necessary. As a result, Diaz reported that he quickly exited his vehicle, failing to first place the vehicle in park. His partner later placed the vehicle in park as it began rolling away from him. After exiting and yelling, "Stop," Diaz observed the passenger, whom he believed at the time to be a male, reach towards something and produce a black object which he said he perceived to be a gun. Diaz said he feared for his life, believing the passenger was armed and had already fired at officers. As a result, he fired his handgun 1 to 3 times at the passenger. The subject vehicle's engine revved, and the car began accelerating across the grass island, turning and coming directly towards Diaz. Diaz stated that he felt the subject vehicle was going to ram him and pin him between the subject vehicle and his cruiser, not realizing that his cruiser was rolling away. As such, Diaz fired his handgun 1 to 3 times at the driver. As the subject vehicle came off the island, it straightened and missed striking Diaz. The vehicle then began traveling back out the same driveway in which it had entered the parking lot. Diaz, who was the first officer to discharge a weapon, said he believed he fired a total of 4 shots. However, he was uncertain how many he directed toward the passenger and driver, but thought it was perhaps 2 rounds each. Radio traffic after Diaz fired his weapon indicated that shots had been fired, but did not specify who had fired.